Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. I will first start to talk to you in English, then I'm going to provide the same information into Portuguese. And again, thank you very much for being here. My name is Aline Ferreira, and I'm the director of the Latin American Iberian Studies program at the University of California, Santa Barbara. LICE was first established in 1970 as a Hispanic civilizations. LICE at UCSB is the oldest interdisciplinary program on campus and the only one in the UC system that offers an Iberian component. LICE provide training both at the undergrad and the graduate levels, offering a Bachelor of Arts and Masters of Arts, an MA degree. And at its core, LICE is interdisciplinary. LICE examines the region from a variety of disciplines within humanities and social science, from arts and media studies and literature to history, anthropology, sociology, political sciences, linguistics, geography, and environmental studies. I'm very happy that you have decided to join us for this event and hopefully for the next events, for the next year's scholar, activists, writers, and artists taking part in our events. We'll be taking part in our events, sorry. So before I introduce today's speaker, I want to make sure that you're aware of the question and answer function on your screen. You can submit questions to our speaker in English or Portuguese at any time during the event. And when our speaker concludes her presentation, we will to pose as many questions as possible to her. Just a second, please. I am very excited of having our speaker here today. And before I introduce her, I also would like to extend our thanks to our co-sponsors, the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, Environmental Studies Program, Global Studies, the Brand School of Environmental Science and Management, and the Interdisciplinary Humanities Center. Also our grad students from LICE and the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, Amy House, Alina Almeida, and Benjamin Chaffin, like to express our appreciation for the work of our PASC team, including Shivan Begali, our Vice Director André, Irina, Teresa, Helena, Tyler, Eloida, also to Marcos Colon, who has for his willingness to help to discuss this important topic as the one that we're discussing today. Also to all professors and teachers who are joining us today. Happy Teachers Day, Brazilian teachers. They have their own holiday annually in October 15, and this is an important date because it has a historical background for us. On October 15, 1827, Emperor of Brazil Pedro I signed a special decree on establishment of primary schools for lower class, thus making education accessible for every layer of society in Brazil. So this date became a major significance for the further development of Brazil. And so happy Teachers and Professors Day in Brazil for you all. And I also would like to thank our interviewer, Dr. Manaíra Taide. Manaíra, she's a native from Brazil, and she holds a PhD in Materialidades of Literature from the University of Coimbra, Portugal. In the last 2 years, she was visiting scholar at the Department of Iberian and Latin American Cultures at Stanford University, developing a project of digital literary archives. Previously, she was a visiting professor at the University of Salamanca, Spain, and Federal University of São Carlos, Brazil. She teaches and researches in the fields of Latin American Iberian studies, comparative literature, and digital humanities. And before I introduce Marina, I would like to acknowledge the tradition custodians of this place and all land upon which the university is located, and pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and the culture of this area. Furthermore, I would like to offer my solidarity to all the families that are together experiencing, collective grief. I would also like to express our total support for all the indigenous people, and especially the most vulnerable populations, whether urban, rural, or living in settlements in the middle of the Amazon. In 2018, the poverty headcount ratio at 3.20 US dollars a day in Brazil, living on less than 3.20 US dollars per day, while that amount was to 9.2% of the population, which means that the proportion of Brazilian population was living on less than $3.20 per day. The poverty rate has continuously increased since 2014, when this percentage stood at around 7%. Currently, there are over 16 million people in Brazil living below the poverty line, and 4.2 million survive on no income at all. Marina is Jarina, which means ivory nut palm. It's a perfect rhyme to define the woman seed that, like the seed, is precious and rare. The seeds of the Jarina plant are the only biogel typical of her native land, the Amazonian region of Acre, Brazil, that always accompany her. A humanist of Franciscan habits, Marina Silva has spread her seeds of hope wherever she passes, be that as a teacher, an environmentalist, a stateswoman, or even an Amazonian warrior in Brazilian politics. Minister Marina learned to read at the age of 14, and when she was 16 years old, she left the rubber plantations for the capital of Acre, Rio Branco, in Brazil, where she worked as a maid, while never neglecting her studies, which demonstrate her strength, tenacity, and courage. At the university, she joined social movements, interacting with men and women with traditional knowledge. Soon, Marina emerged as a leader alongside Chico Mendes, when he gave himself the fight for extractivism reserves and continued in the struggle until the ultimately death by back then in 1988. Marina graduated in history and specialized in psychopedagogy and theory of psychoanalysis. She is a honorary doctor from the Federal University of Bahia and the Chinese Academy of Silviculture. In almost 30 years of public life, She has gained recognition both inside and outside the country, for her defense of the environment, tradition costumes and communities, and sustainable development with social environmental justice. She's been a counselor, a delegate, and in 2002, at the age of 38, she became the youngest senator in Brazil, serving 3 terms. Marina has received dozens of titles and national and international awards, such as the Goldman Prize, WWF Duke of Edinburgh Conservation Award, and the highest environmental decoration of the United Nations, the UN Champions of the Earth Award. She was elected Woman of the Year by the Financial Times magazine in 2004, and in 2008, she featured on the list of the English newspaper, The Guardian, amongst the 50 people that could save the planet. Our ex-minister, Marina Silva, is among the greatest representatives of human ecology that you can have as a reference. And for all her strength, tenacity, and courage, she deserves our recognition and applause. Right now, I'm gonna go to the Portuguese channel and I'm gonna provide some information for them. You guys can stay in this channel for now. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ferreira, for this presentation. Happy Teacher's Day for you, we're there. Today is Teacher's Day, as Dr. Ferreira said. So we're very happy to be here today. Thank you very much. And I also would like to thank Marina, former Minister of the Environment, for being here. Welcome here. And we're going to have a nice afternoon talking to Marina. Please go ahead and note. You can leave your questions in the chat. And at the end, we're going to try to answer as many questions as possible. I will start with a sentence that mark 2019. Amazon is burning. By then, INPE registered from January and August an increase in 84% of fires in Brazil in comparison to the previous year, same year. And half of this burning was in the Amazon. Last year, it increased in 9.5% the number of fires. As we know, Amazon is the biggest forest, tropical forest, and the biggest center of biodiversity in the world. Therefore, this is a very important topic for everyone. Because of that, I will ask you, Marina, how the questions related to democracy and environment are related, and how societies can make this transition in a way that is conscious and civilized, the way that you have been helping for so many years. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone this invitation from UCSB. I'd like to say Happy Teacher's Day to all teachers and professors who are there. It's a time for us to think about how we are compromised and how we're engaged in teaching terms of economy and environment and everything. And I'd like to thank you and say congratulations to you all. Shiva, Manaíra, Alina, André, Ami, Marcos, who has helped us with this contact. And coming back to the question, I think that the question is very, very relevant. And is very important because of what we're living in Brazil right now. Actually, we're living in a situation of complete disarticulation in terms of social and environmental policies. And that has to do with this government view that's very retrograde. Some of them are worse than that. They are regressions that have been done in areas that we were able to help somehow. Even though it was hard in the past, we could move forward and make some change. Now, we are walking backwards. It's a governmental that has a negationist view. They are on denial and they're denying our problems, especially those related to environment. It's an authoritarian government. It's an unilateral government. It's a vertical government. And they deny any type of help from academy, from NGOs, on all organizations that have been working in order to preserve the Amazon. So democracy is related to the protection or neglection of the environment. We have a challenge now, which is to change the system that we have now and move towards a sustainable way of living. It is also part of our cultural awareness, ethical awareness, aesthetical awareness, and also political. So we have to think, with no democracy, it's very hard to take care in order to work and make those changes that are necessary, especially in the case of Brazil, because the government in less than 3 years, most of what we had gained in terms of structure, they destroyed with a narrative that is completely related against what we have done before. Everything that we had done to help, they destroyed it. By that she means with no democracy, it's impossible to discuss the situations that we have now, especially in the case of the Amazon.
Muito obrigada. Continuando a pensar nesse cenário que está a colocar, de que maneira a polarização política atua?
So, in which way the polarization of politics, left or right, which is a phenomenon that we see in several countries, not only Brazil, in several Latin American countries, even here in the US, Portugal, Spain, several places. This is a question that is part of so many countries right now. So in which way this political polarization has affected our environmental questions? So this polarization is a perverse thing because it ignores the points that are actually important. And they keep debating about a project that has to do only with power. And one has only to deny the point of the other person. Meanwhile, the questions that should be asked, because we have several diagnostics right now, those questions, they're left. And this is a problem. And it has to do with the polarization, of course. The other question is, polarization happens around a conservatory view, a traditional view that is against progression and against any idea that protects the human rights and biodiversity and anything that had an agenda to combat inequalities in the world. So what we have, it's a process of negation when they are denying those systems. When you say environmental polarization from both sides, right and left, they start to fight. If you talk about human rights, oh, this is something related to communism. You are a communist. So every time that you try to discuss serious issues, the polarization takes control and we cannot move forward. In Brazil, for instance, we have this big problem of in the Amazon, and the government all the time is always arguing and denying the reality, denying the facts, saying that the problem that we have is a problem of image, that we have to improve Brazil's image outside Brazil. It's really hard to improve the image of Brazil when over 100,000 of alerts in terms of the issues that we have in terms of deforestation, they were completely denied. So less than 5% of the over 100,000 of alerts that took place were actually taken in consideration at some level. So we have a budget to decrease the emission of carbon dioxide, but they don't work on that. They ignore that. Thank you very much. So how can we create those alternative ways? How can we escape this scenario, this dualist scenario, the polarized discourse? How can we walk? How can we move in order to achieve that? I think there's something that's fundamental. We have to pay attention and not to be part of this polarization all the time. And also to not become so attached to all the strategies related to take us away from focusing on the problem. And those strategies, they are very powerful and they deconstruct, they destroy what we build. So Brazil, right now, we are responsible for 1/3 of the virgin forests that were destroyed in the world. And that was all in the last government, in the last 3 years. What we could do when I was the minister from 2003 to 2008, we're responsible for 80% of the protected areas that were created in the world. 5 billions of CO2 were not emitted. And we created a plan that decreased deforestation for 83% for over 1 decade. Why I'm saying that? Because I know that most of our problems, we already have answers for them or technical answers for that. What we don't have is a government that can keep working on those proposals and make sure that those proposals, they are taken seriously. So this Brazilian poet says, sometimes it's not even necessary to find another way. What we need to find sometimes is another way to walk. Sometimes we can get some things by just changing the way that we walk. For instance, instead of attacking the NGOs which are trying to help the Amazon, we could join them and make sure that we are able to work with them. So it would be great to foster this idea of change, to create and also to create new structures that would lead us to this way to make a transition in which we could have a system that can be economically possible, but also political, democratic. Sorry about that. My next question is the following. Part of all the discussion is conducted via social media. And this polarization is also related to this new way that we have of living, in which there is this, because of the democratization of the access in terms of social media and electronic devices. What we have right now is a narrative war. Each of us now can understand that Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, how we use it within this context. How important is the social media in terms of the Amazon? We saw how strong that was in the last elections, how important the social media was in the Brazilian elections. And these strategies of communication, they have been changing the way that we engage. It's important to remember that in each election, in every election, we have new ways of communication that are acting in a way that we have never seen before. How can we bring that to the discussion around the Amazon then? First, internet and social media, they have a lot of importance and strength, and they also have a very important role to create an audience, to amplify a message, to ask questions that sometimes traditional media, they know, but they only get to know because of the negative repercussion that that topic had in the social media. And they are, in fact, a space in which, in a communicative dynamic, a knowledge dynamic about facts. However, that happens, that can be positive, but that can also be negative. And it is almost a war in terms of narratives because you're exchanging information. For instance, we have deforestation that is just increasing, fires are also increasing, and then so many people came and say that NGO set the forest on fire. We also have this oil split in Brazil, and tons of oil were split, and that damaged the biodiversity, our beach, our animals. And immediately we have this commotion of the population in Brazil. But at the same time, there were people saying that a Greenpeace ship spilled the oil on purpose. And that not only happens in Brazil, that happens in other countries too. But there are also good things about social media too. For instance, in my experience, and back then we didn't have enough strength as we do today in terms of the social media, we create a system in which we would organize the database, and that would be available for anyone who can read those information. They could find the information related to where can I find where there is a deforestation happening right now. So people were on denial. They're saying that that data was wrong. Because of that, I left the government back then. Back then, there was this harmonization within the society, both within Brazil and outside Brazil. The president could have kept the plan going. And we were able to see the effect. For instance, from 2004 until 2012, we saw progression. Even with all this effort that the reaction groups wanted to not to take that law into consideration, we went beyond. We used the social media to have all this information clean and clear, in which we're compromised and we're working in a way to reduce the emission of carbon dioxide. So some people are saying that in the next elections, there are some feminine voices there. So who we're discussing who would be the big names in the next elections next year in Brazil. So we're thinking how is the real situation in Brazil? How we don't see anyone talking when we cannot see a woman trying to run for elections in Brazil, for instance. And Marina said, this is like a step back. We had in the past women in the politics, even though we have different opinions, we had women there. In one of the most complicated times in terms of economy, politics, environment, race, First Nations, and COVID. And we saw that the countries that have the best solutions in terms of COVID and pandemic were the countries that were governed by women. However, in Brazil, we don't have any woman right now. I myself already participated in 3 elections. And that's very strange to see that there is no women there running next year. And it's scary because even the polls, they have a bias. I have been saying that in public because what we see is there are several male names there, even men who never affirmed that they would be candidates, but there is no one single name of a woman who could be willing, who could be on those lists and run for the elections. I saw this is something that is very negative for democracy, for the things and the topic that we have to discuss structurally from the women's viewpoint. Questions that are related to sustainability, gender, and race. We need this view, we need this gaze, we need this sensibility, this proactive sensibility that came from women. Thank you very much. Thinking about your history, so many decades as an activist, environmental activist, what are the most important changes in which society has looked into the indigenous questions in Brazil? She's asking about the gaze from society. And also in relation to the lands, the First Nation lands, and several questions that were not raised before. And now somehow they have a voice from those who are living those things. And social media has a power to do that too. We had some progression, but that progression is not what we need. We need that people have, in fact, this understanding that defending the rights of human nation is not just, cannot be only about words. We have to see that translated in public policies, health, education, bilingual education, landmarking. So when you mark the area, you have to expel those who are illegally occupying the First Nations land. So we have to go beyond that sympathy. We do have several people who are engaged in the world, and this voice is increasing in terms of consistency, persistency, and that sometimes come from the same First Nation organizations, like people who fishermen, traditional fishermen, people who work in and also the quilombolas population in Brazil. So we have this increase in terms of strength, in terms of our organization. So we have more access to information now, and they are more engaging in comparison to the past. And now we can see the support from the academics, and that's very good. But we have to translate that. For instance, when you're voting for a deputy or a senator, you cannot choose someone who is the First Nations enemy. Those people, they wanted to end any rights and human rights that the First Nation conquered. For instance, those who go there and steal the land, they're voting for those who occupied the First Nation. They occupied the First Nation, but they wanted to leave that, but they wanted to stay there, and there was no the government was not against that. So people should be aware of that when they're voting, to choose someone who they believe that can help with the First Nation lands. So how does it feel after so many decades? How do you see, after so many decades of activism, what is the difference when you think back then, when you started, when you thought about the type of work, people who were involved with you, and nowadays, what can you tell us that has changed? What type of people came and joined you? What type of support came? There are so many decades that Marina has working in the field. How can we compare and analyze, taking in consideration the very beginning and what we have right now? We have changes that are very significant in terms of process, in terms of structures, in terms of social environmental activism. And it's increasing, it's interesting in terms of the view, the principles, the values, those who defend the forest, the biodiversity, landmarking, they keep the same ideals back then when we started with Chico Mendes. But nowadays, we also have this increase in terms of the support from academia that helps us in the front line, and teachers, and those who are working with the information about the situation in the Amazon right now. So before, we have this directed activism because it was directed by the union, the party, the church, and they did a very good job, especially the church and also some parties too. But that changed. It's not this activism that is directed by a charismatic leader. It's an activism that is done by each individual. So we have so many organizations, we have so many researchers and studies who are working and analyzing the level of deforestation, for instance. We have all the systems in Brazil, such as the climate observation, INPA. We saw that we lost 50% of the water surface of Brazil. So we know that there is a mix of activists, academia, companies, young people. So there is a change. So I believe that even though this dark time of Bolsonaro, which I hope ends very soon and he leaves very soon. So we still have hope that we will be able to make this change.
Está destruindo, serrando o nosso galho, né? O galho em que a gente está se sustentando, para um modelo sustentável de desenvolvimento.
To a sustainable way of development. Since we're talking about Chico Mendes, we have here not only Brazilians, but we also have foreigners, Americans, Portuguese people. We're listening to this from different countries. So could you talk a little bit about your history with Chico Mendes and what is the importance of his heritage in terms of environment? How he started? And what is actually Chico Mendes for us? For those who don't know who Chico Mendes was. Because we talked about him, we'd like to talk a little bit about him. I met Chico Mendes when I was very young. I was 17 years old. He was an adult and very engaged in this fight to defend the forest and in the rubber plant. And those who work in the rubber plantation, we are not indigenous, my family, but we are recognized such as. So when I met him, I started to engage within that process. And back then, Chico, he was way beyond his time. He liked to create leadership. He was not a centralized person. He wouldn't take all the glorious victories for himself. He was a humble man. He had a very great capacity of sharing authorship. He wanted to work together with cooperation or co-creation. So he used to think together, to realize together, to share together this recognition. So when I started to work in politics, I always put those questions that I learned with Chico. We don't have to all the time talking about ourselves, because people go and come and go, people make mistakes. What if something happened? And then what if you don't have this whole process as a democratic process? And people thought that, well, if we kill Chico, we're gonna end this fight. No, we have so many Chicos that were being created by them, and they are spread around the world. So I have a question from Maria Mirtes Mesquita. In the case of garimpeiros, this week, for instance, I saw that in São Paulo, 2 children, First Nation children, were taken. And that was a case amongst other. It's very painful. How can you talk about this problems of conscientization of the population? How can we talk about this issue with these children that were destroyed, they were killed by machines in Rio? And so things that had happened in Brazil hundreds of years ago are still happening. And I would like to add something to that question. How can we think about bringing those questions related to the Amazon to outside the Amazon? How those questions can be about Brazil? This is a question that I always ask to myself. Why those questions are put like Amazonian question? But that should be a question of the country, a question from everyone. It's a pain from everyone. This is a very strong question, Mirt's question. It's a metaphor. It's a perverse metaphor. and concrete. It's a concrete metaphor of what is happening to the First Nation in Brazil. Children were murdered, literally destroyed. And that is what's happening. So in each 10 children from the Yanomami First Nation tribe, 4 are contaminated by mercury. And that's very serious in terms of the children's health, their neurological system. Those children will have issues. They're literally destroying the future of the First Nation. Can you imagine a population that is already diminished in Brazil? They were over 5 million when the Portuguese arrived in Brazil. And after 500 years, we eliminated them. We killed approximately 1 million indigenous people in Brazil per century. Now we have 900,000 First Nation in Brazil, men and women and children. So these people have been attacked because they are losing their right to land. The change in terms of legislation that has been proposed in the government. The proposal is the following. There is a cutoff date of 1988 for the First Nation land claims. Indigenous are rejecting the time frame adopted in 2016, but they're very scared of that. They are scared of losing their lands. So many people nowadays are engaged in the defense of the Amazon in several places in Brazil. Not only it's not the number that we need. Polls have indicated that the data have indicated that over 80% of the population in Brazil, they don't want to see the Amazon destroyed. Those people said they would pay more for food if they could preserve. However, when they're voting for people in terms of the executive, legislative, they're not voting the people who are willing to help. So what we need to do is denouncing. We have to work in terms of gathering information, showing that if we have the forest alive, we can actually make money. Well, it protects Brazil, it also protects Brazil to become a big desert, because Amazon is responsible for the rain, for over 70% of rain in South America and Brazil, and also for the environment, and also for the whole world, of course. It's a humanity cause. If we just keep producing CO2 the way we are, we're going to destroy the environment. We are getting close to what the specialists are calling are saying that there at some point there is not going to be a way back at all. Another question from Leonardo Feitosa. Marina, Brazilian politicians, they just a second, I need to listen to that first. How do you see the military forces of Brazil about the Amazon, and also the Bolsonarism government? When he leaves the government, do you think that there will be a decrease in terms of deforestation, even though it might be the case the same military people would be in the politics in the next few years? So that's a very good question about the future. in future of the Amazon as well.
esse ideário militar brasileiro.
And how can we think about the military forces of Brazil and how that is important in Brazil nowadays?
Os militares, a gente tem que olhar para eles
Military,
não como se fossem homogêneos.
we cannot look at them as they were all the same thing, even though, because if you think about it, if they were homogenic, maybe Bolsonaro would be able to do what he wants, which is a coup.
Pelo menos uma parte,
So part of them,
7 de setembro foi emblemático,
if you think about it,
deu sustentação a uma
they wanted, there was an attempt of coup on the 7th, September the 7th, the Independence Day of Brazil, and that didn't work. So because of that, we can think that we cannot put all the military people in the same group. There are differences amongst them.
eles têm uma visão
You're right when you say that they have this developmental view,
integrar para não entregar a Amazônia,
the idea of integrate so you don't give it away. It's a way to think that the enemy of the Amazon is outside Brazil. That's not true. The enemy of the Amazon is inside the Amazon. Politics and other people who want to destroy the Amazon, and instead of the Amazon, what they want us to have there is livestock breeding, bovine livestock, cattle farming, and what we could do instead is to use all the services that the forest and all the products that can be generated within the forest, we can work on them instead. So professors Carlos Nobre, for instance, talk about this idea of bioeconomy. In that sense, we can think that the militares, they have this idea of the occupation of the Amazon, and Bolsonaro tried to get them support. They wanted actually money, Bolsonaro and his team, they wanted money to create a military system in the Amazon to create a model of development of the early last century in the world. And that's everything that impacts the environment. Back then, I was the minister. When I was the minister, I was there and the military people were there in the Amazon. I know how they were. So militaries would help us with the logistics, but who were investigating when I was working as the minister, we sent to jail 125 people who were working with the mafia related to all types of crime related to the destruction of Amazon. We found over 60,000 of illegal properties that were there to destroy the Amazon, and the military of Brazil, they were giving support to those people. So it's very hard. It's hard to live, like when we're gonna fix that is also a problem. For instance, when you find all the logging, the illegal logging, who's gonna help us with that? Oh, the military, they will do that. So we kind of need them too. But if you have knowledge, you can understand that we need the Amazon. Without the Amazon, the rest of the country cannot survive. For instance, the water. We already have enough water that, and we use that water. And the forest does that for free for us. So there is intelligence, and I know that there is amongst the military people, we just do not destruct whatever is going to give us profit, and they know that we cannot let locked out. We have to work within, from the within. Governments can have a developmental view, and they try to make those alliances with this old-fashioned agribusiness people, instead of working towards an economy of low carbon dioxide emissions, for instance. So it just gets harder to keep this way of thinking that they did in the past, what we call developmental system. We know that there are so much pressure from other countries and places. Right now, Olivia is asking us, what can we do, like small steps in our daily lives to make a difference? How can we make a difference?
Das grandes florestas, do meio ambiente, como nós podemos fazer essa diferença no nosso dia a dia?
How can we make a difference? What can we change? I'm going to talk about this question that's very interesting. We cannot just let the government and the companies to decide on that. We have our individual responsibility, and in terms of community too. I want to talk about something that you mentioned, Manaria. It's just every time it's harder to keep this old-fashioned developmental view. So everybody thinking that that development is linear, that everything is infinite, that everything is going to last forever. And the planet, they thought that the planet would just give everything to us and it was infinite. So now we see that if we do 100% of what we're doing, still we're going to have an increase in temperature. And of course, the problems that we see nowadays are just going to get worse. Even if we do everything that we decide to do in the Paris Agreement, we're still in trouble. So United Kingdom, United European, Canada, United States, China, they're all aware of that nowadays. China, for instance, said that they're not, they're more aware of those questions nowadays. So that makes hard for those developmentalists to keep their view and just using whatever they want, thinking that everything is infinite. So Brazil is getting in trouble, is losing the investments because countries like China don't want to do business with Brazil anymore for those same reasons. This developmental view. Brazil either follow the rules or is out. So when we're talking about what can we do as individuals to help, we can save energy, water. We can, in terms of consumerism, we can get what we need only. And by the way, today is the day of the teachers in Brazil, but it's also the day of the conscious consumption. Because in my opinion, there is the toxic consumption, but there is also something that's necessary. We kind of have to detox from this capacity, this idea that we only have to be loved if we have stuff. That's I call the ideal of to be There is no limitation for being the best what you are. In that place, we can be the best, and there is no limitation. So we have to be, not to have. Sustainability is not just a way to have or to do, but it's a way of being. You have to feel uncomfortable when you see some things or when you're not doing your job. And when this is kind of internalized, when you do something that you don't even take into consideration, we don't keep thinking, oh, I have to remind myself that I have to eat. No, it's organic. The same way we have to think, I have to be aware that in order for this world to be alive and for myself to be alive, I have to pay attention to a new way of being in this world, relating to ourselves, to other people, and to the nature. Another question from Ana Rita Guerra. Bolsonaro is re-elected. You think that the Amazon can get to that no back point? Absolutely. His attitude, the government's attitude of ignoring the landmarking for the First Nation, or not providing the budget for IBAMA, which is the institution that investigates crime in the Brazilian forests. Budgets just decrease there. And deforestation is just increasing. So if there is a cutoff in terms of land claims, we are in trouble. So there's so many things that are going on in terms of that traditional development in Brazil. And if that keeps going on, we are done. However, I think that Bolsonaro is going down in terms of popularity. And there is a big resistance from Brazilian society. He's been committing several crimes to the environment, people, education, human rights. Is a government that is distancing from any civilizatory pattern. I believe that we will stop him somehow, impeachment, voting, because he is a big problem. He's a threat, not only to Brazil, but to the world. And Amazon is really close to this no back point. So, for instance, before Amazon will help with the carbon dioxide. Now, when she was sequestering the carbon dioxide, Amazon was helping us. But things are changing. We believe that Bolsonaro has to be either impeached or democratically. But impeachment is also a democratic procedure because he's been committing responsibility crimes. But he can also live by the vote. I would like him to be impeached because Brazil cannot take 13 months of Bolsonaro government on top of everything that we already have been through. Another question. After Bolsonaro leaves, it would be possible for Brazil to elect only presidents who would be favorable to pro-environment politicians. Would be possible to have the effective implementation of laws in Brazil. So maybe you could see more results
governo brasileiro, não é? Não adianta só informações.
It's not enough only to have information, empty information. We have to have goals, tangible goals, doable, achievable goals. Would it be possible to Brazil to walk, to move towards this more friendly government, towards those causes? This fight has a lot of resistance from some areas, and they come closer to all the governments that have been elected in Brazil. And they try to impose their agenda in detriment of the advancements that need to be accelerated. I hope that society keeps thinking and mobilizing themselves, and that we keep thinking that we have been living the effects of climate change, and we know that there are loss in terms of Brazilian agriculture because of the drought, sorry. We have a big problem in terms of inflation, increase in prices of food in Brazil, and inflation is walking towards being out of control, and it is actually. If you think about the energy too, the price of electricity went high because of the drought. And again, the fires in the Amazon also contributed to the climate change. I hope that Brazilian society keeps thinking and organizing themselves and think about the Brazilian interests. I would like Brazil not to have re-elections. It's a disservice to strategic services in Brazil. People don't do what is necessary to Brazil. What they do is they do what is necessary for them to be re-elected. They have problems with Fernando Henrique, Dilma, Lula, several going back to the past because of that. Because what they wanted is to gain popularity and be re-elected. So I believe that 5 years of contract, they will be there for 4 years. I'll make a change. I would make this change. So you go there with an agenda, and society gives them the agenda in terms of environment, education, food, and that shouldn't change because the party changed. Long-term policies would be the solution, and not short-term policies, because that only helps the politicians. That's what I've been defending, and I really hope that Bolsonaro never comes back, because this is just an expectative, and we have to work towards it.
Estamos chegando ao fim da nossa conversa. Vou colocar só uma última questão.
So we're walking towards the end of this talk today. Now we have a last question. Code is asking, parts of Amazon are in other nations like Peru. So has Brazilian treatment of the Amazon affected its relations with its neighboring nations? I believe that we could have an integrated work, like the 9 countries that share the Amazon. We need a plan that can take care of the protection of the forest in all those countries. Brazil has the biggest part of the Amazon, and I defend this idea of a Marshall Plan. So those countries could have their plans of sustainable development of the Amazon. When I was the minister, we had that. Of course, unfortunately, when I left, it didn't work very well. But the idea was, I'd like to articulate this within the area, the Amazon, so we could work together in order to achieve this biodiversity work in the Amazon. So we could destinate the areas in a proper way, create big ecological areas, avoid big projects, electricity, roads, mining, this type of thing. This is a view of a sustainable environmental project. So it is possible to develop economy that is based on the forest as it is. So we have an idea. Vale do Rio Doce, a big mining company, it provides less taxes than açaí. It's a Brazilian berry. It creates fewer jobs to Brazil. Vale creates fewer jobs than the production of açaí. For instance, açaí generates over 300,000 jobs in Brazil, and Vale do Rio Doce only generates 20,000. And we're talking about fruit here. So there's, just like the açaí, there's so many other products that we can extract there without hurting it. We have other fruits, cocoa from the forest, uricuri, have so many products, guariúba, acopaíba, cupuaçu. I can tell you 30, 40 types of fruits that are very, very important for our bioeconomy. And that's for all countries in the Amazon working together.
Muito obrigada, Marina. Nosso tempo acabou. Foi uma tarde em que abrimos discussões importantes aqui. Espero que quem esteja conosco.
Thank you very much. We talked about very important topics here. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that we keep talking about this in the future. LICE program and all co-sponsors, we thank you very much. And now I'm gonna ask Professor Aline Ferreira to finalize the session. I hope that you guys who have been with us until now, you have enjoyed it and learned something, and you can keep this discussion outside this space. We can keep talking about important topics and think about important topics for the new year, the new times that are coming. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very, very much, Marina. Thank you very much, everybody who were here with us for all this time. I hope you guys have learned a bit about what we can do and what's going on in the Amazon right now, what this government is doing to the Amazon, and what previous governments have done to the Amazon. And I really hope that we can keep working together and discussing these important topics and walking together in a way to find a new way of living and a new way of being, as Marina was saying. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Com certeza. Muito obrigada, professora Aline. Um prazer estar com vocês. E é dessa articulação que eu tenho certeza que a gente vai fazer do Brasil, em vez de ser esse lugar terrível que a gente está vendo hoje, o lugar de uma espécie de novo renascimento. Tchau, tchau. Eu só quero agradecer pela oportunidade de estar com vocês. Parabéns por essa iniciativa. Com certeza, fazer esse tipo de debate nos ajuda muito. É isso que foi ampliando, ampliando, ampliando. Hoje a gente consegue ter parceiros no mundo inteiro. Eu me lembro desde o Chico Mendes, quando tudo isso começou, e ver essa rede que existe hoje no mundo é fantástico. Muito obrigada, foi um prazer.
Obrigada, Marina, muito obrigada. Foi um prazer tê-la aqui.
Obrigada. Tchau, tchau.
Tchau, tchau.
Tchau, tchau. Ainda segue gravando, hein?
Shiva, can you turn it off, please? The recording, if you're there, or André.